the first image I ever produced. I'm just being told that I have a recording in progress. Is that okay?
Yes, it's fine.
Great, good, everything's fine. Yeah, so this was the first thing that I ever made. If you're a data visualizer slash, processing user, then you will be, very underwhelmed by this. But I had my socks knocked off by this. I was amazed. This was the dream of a 79-year-old woman. How could that be? How could that possibly be anybody's dream? And yet it didn't seem like there was something kind of beautiful about it. And I don't know, this reminded me quite a bit of the Unknown Masterpiece by a famous French author. And it's one of my all-time favorite stories, because in it the master has been composing his final masterpiece for years and years and years, and when he finally has these visitors, they come in and all they see is this massive scribbled kind of garbage, and somehow by allowing them to see it, the artist himself ends up seeing it through their eyes, and he kind of has this moment of going, oh my gosh, maybe this is just this tangled mass of garbage. It's interesting because it's being written about, this is the birth of abstract art in a story long before abstraction existed. So I don't know, maybe there's something like that. There's this beauty in the eye of the beholder kind of thing, where I was really amazed by this, and yet I don't know anyone else was at all impressed. But anyway, that's kind of been the theme of the whole project, I think, to an extent. So I continued, I started learning more programming, more processing, and I started developing slightly more complicated images. Not that much more complicated, but I like these because this is still the same. When I say EEG brainwaves, you think of the things that you see on, Law and Order or whatever, the person's dying and they have the little heart rate, beep, 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 and there's that sort of grid of time and these little waves going beep, 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 beep. Well, that's what brainwaves sort of look like too. And to have them completely recoordinated and shifted around into a scribble that goes all over the place rather than sort of in this nice linear format struck me as being very appropriate for dreaming. So, yeah, I was really pleased with these. And this some of them, sometimes this is the dream of a 66-year-old woman, mildly phallic for those who are inclined to think that way. And so there's these, there's kind of literal ways of reading these as well. Then that there's some sort of magic moments that kind of seem to happen as well. Okay, then I started to get into more and more complex things. This is actually those exact same brainwaves, but they're wrapped around in a circle. So all of those little jaggedy lines are all just being bent around a circle, and the different levels represent different placements of electrodes or heart rate or eye movement or something like that. So I have a few examples of those that I can share. Sometimes they produce a rounder form, which is, that's caused by an aberration in the data, actually. And they kind of look like flowers, or they kind of look like explosions of some kind, both of which I thought were kind of appropriate metaphors for dreaming. And then even more complicated from a programming perspective, this represents 1 second of somebody's dream. And so I took a 5-minute dream and created an expression, I don't know what to call these, for each of the 300 seconds. And so there's a sort of insight into just how incredibly complicated, well, they illustrate how incredibly complicated the brain is and what it's doing when it's dreaming. EEG itself isn't all that complicated, but this is sort of a gesture in that direction. So there's 300 of these just for one dream, and they're all quite different. They all have their own sort of shape and form. I think I might try to make an animated thing of all of those so they kind of scroll through. That's what I'll do during my virtual residency. That'll be my homework task during my residency here. Okay, so I've got my flowers, atoms. And then at some point, oh, that's a bit of a giveaway. I'll go back to this. At some point, I realized that I could use the exact same thing, same process to create music as well. And I didn't, again, it's like the people that do this know how to do this. I don't know if Cynthia Nagar ever made it here. She was the residence, artist in residence, I think just before me here at Struts. And she knows a lot about this kind of thing. And like she knows how to use something called Max MSP. Very impressive, cool piece of software. And I have no idea about any of this kind of stuff. So I was still kind of determined to try to figure out, well, what I could do with the technology that I had. So again, with my Excel spreadsheets and a website I found and good old GarageBand on the Mac, let's see if I can do this now. See if I can try to play this. Boink. Is that coming through, guys? So yeah, right? Like again, I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I just took one electrode placement and I said, okay, that's going to be this kind of, rhythm. And this other one is going to kind of create more like chords, and the muscle tension, which is always a very sort of mellow, that'll be like more in the bass register. And yeah, I was so pleased with the result. I thought it just sounded amazing. And then I was never really able to duplicate how awesome that first one sounded. And the other ones that I started to do, I started to add, there was a 22-year-old man, 22-year-old sort of dude dream. And I made that with, electric guitars and bass and drums and this kind of thing. And it sounds awful and kind of awesome, but kind of awful at the same time. And yeah, so there's a lot more to explore there. But I wanted to try to find something that sounded a little bit more musical. There's a whole, world of sonic art that often relies on, I don't know. Oil painting relies on a series of tropes and stuff as well, right? And that doesn't make oil painting problematic. But a lot of the sonic art that I listen to in thinking about this, there's a similarity. There's a lot of droning, there's a lot of repetitive loops. And I wanted to try to make something that somebody could play, right? Like somebody could sit at a piano keyboard and make and play. And so it was, somewhat successful. And this is definitely an area I want to explore some more. But I also wanted to take this a moment to sort of talk a little bit about sort of how much failure goes into these kinds of long-term projects. Like just how many, well, that's good to talk about. How much, and also like the idea of like delusion. Like I think that there's a certain sense that in order to make, I don't know if you have to be deluded to make any art, but it seems sort of to, yeah, it does seem to sometimes be the case that you have to kind of see things kind of wrong in a way. And so this is where that image of this is what I thought I needed to do, right? This is how I should spend my time. Oh my gosh, I can make music out of dreams. So I need to buy a glockenspiel, right? That's what you, right? There's a logical step. and like there's I had this handle thing and this tube of plastic with nails I don't know how long this took me to make. Like this was a months, right? I spent making this like hand cranked glockenspiel, and the idea was that I would drill nails in this plastic thing that would correspond to EEG data in some kind of confusing way. And that as you turn the handle, you'd be hearing somebody's dream being manually played on these like clanking, and it was completely absurd and again kind of appropriate to dreaming. But this is another project that just kind of ended up. Now I have this great glockenspiel that I don't ever play, and a bunch of wooden mallets, because it just didn't really work. And there's loads of that, right? Like you can see when I opened this photo, I saw those like little white globe things in the back. What the hell are those? Apparently I was trying to make some kind of like ball on a stick thing, and then I went and I found them, and they're these things. I don't know if you can see, but right, like what's that? I have so there's all like behind the things that actually kind of make it to the website that you kind of want to say, hey, look at me, look at what I did. There's like just stacks and stacks of just these weird failed attempts at things. And I think that's not something that's very visible in the art world enough, and so anyway, I kind of wanted to just draw some attention to that. There's a folly about all of this, this whole game, I think. So anyway, then let's see. So I started making music, and if you want to hear more of it, then it's not very sociable to play a lot of it here. But I encourage you to go to the site and have a listen. From there, I also started. I realized that I could do 3D printing. Right, and so I printed this guy. No, and that meant that I had to go and meet people. I had to get out of my little studio space and find out, what 3D printing was all about. And that meant going to Fab Labs. I went to a Fab Lab in Geneva, which was very much what you'd expect a Fab Lab in Geneva to be. Lots of a very dark basement. I mean, the walls were painted black. It wasn't a dark basement. There was like, pentagrams on the floor, kind of a place. And people were very friendly. And eventually I found another space a little bit closer to me, and I met this gentleman, Bernard, who is a retired engineer, and his wife is a retired math professor. Just an absolutely marvelous, wonderful, lovely couple. And they invited me over for lunch. And this guy, when I sort of started explaining my project, he was just so excited about his 3D printer and his 3D printing skills that he was like, oh, I can print that. Let me print that. I can print that for you. And he did. He, spent $40 worth of filament on this ridiculous thing, and it was just amazing. And I want to show you this as well. He printed me this. Look, this is kind of what some of the sculptures kind of ended up looking like, and it says "Dream, Ben Evans," which cool. I don't know quite what this is like the title, right? This is in English. This is in Dream, Ben Evans. And it's so, yeah, one of the great things about this project has just been meeting people and kind of getting way outside of my own sort of comfort zone and the kinds of people that I generally meet. And seeing the world from their point of view a little bit more as well. So it's been really, really good. So from there, I got completely hooked on 3D printing, and I bought my own 3D printer, and I started printing things like these. These are dreams. This is using the same kind of principle of using the data from different biometric information from a person who's sleeping, and using that to plot the X, Y, and Z coordinates, and the size and so on. Some of them are more interesting than others. I fairly quickly realized that that simply 3D printing was very cool, but that there was maybe more cool things to do. That 3D printing shouldn't be the end point of a sculptural project. It should sort of be the beginning. So I started to think about sort of textures and things that I could do with these prints. I started covering them in moss and this is other model railway architecture, kind of concrete kind of looking stuff. Candy sprinkles. I want to do one from the sprinkles that you have in Canada. You can get like little tiny ball sprinkles, not the like pokey kind, but these little tiny balls. When I was a kid, I used to eat, like, I think kind of it was supposed to be only when I was sick, but I could eat like just white bread with butter and sprinkles on it. So this is, some of this stuff is actually, it's connected to sort of my own, meanings of these things. So anyway, this is French sprinkles, not Canadian sprinkles. One in gold foil. And they're all, again, like these are all the similar shapes that you could see in the scribbly ones or in the flower or whatever, because they're the same data. Okay, so from there, let me see. Yes, and this is the absurdity of that. It's just again, to be able to sort of have a look at that and say, this is a dream, because that's manifestly not a dream. That's clearly, it's a gold, weird shaped thing. And yet this kind of disconnect of saying that somebody's dreaming mind actually produced that, in a sense, determined the position of that. There's this kind of interesting disconnection between the lived experience of the subject and the kind of the quasi-scientific representation of that experience, the failure of that to capture the subjective experience. That's kind of what I'm most interested in. How am I doing for time? Can you nod, or like still okay? Okay. In that case, I will talk a little bit about another part of the project in which I moved into trying to get at the narratives of dreams as well, so that not just the brain activity as captured by EEG, but actual reports. There's the literature of dream research at that level is quite rich. Obviously, Freud is the early, kind of modernist example of that. And then fairly recently, Freud had his big falling out and everyone discredited Freud and thought his ideas were bananas. And he was pretty heavily castigated by I would say a majority of the intellectual community. And but interestingly enough, so he was kind of replaced by this guy, Alan Hobson, who had the idea that dreams are totally meaningless. It's just the froth that's created. He used the word froth. And they located exactly where dreaming activity takes place in the brain. So he thought in the pons and the brain stem, indicating that it's something that happens kind of biologically. It has no intrinsic meaning. It's just a kind of frothy activity. But more recently, we've kind of come to see that is also, I mean, he was so rabidly anti-Freud that you kind of had to wonder, about his relationship with his mother or something, because why do you hate this guy so much, right? There was something, and it's interesting that now the pendulum seems to be swinging back, and we're realizing how important sort of the psychology of dreaming is, along with its biological function, and that neither Freud nor Hobson, but maybe some kind of interesting thing in the middle is probably the most accurate. So anyway, I was interested in the attempt to objectively assess dream narratives, because we think of dreams as being kind of absurd and unreal and so on. So how does, and the very attempt to try to bring that kind of craziness into some kind of scientific rigor struck me as both interesting and kind of absurd. The people to mention there are Hall and Van de Kassel. I think they're in the 70s, maybe even earlier. He's probably even in the 60s. They started this, and they started trying to create basically sort of dream report cards where they could objectively analyze a report from a dream And, they'd note whether it took place indoors or outdoors, whether there was violence, whether there was a positive result, a negative result, and so on and so forth. Long set of criteria. And they tried to use this. So I wanted to try to find a way to represent that in some kind of, visualization or sculpture or something or other. And that led me, I thought I ended up starting with emotions, because dreams are extremely important for emotional health, believe it or not. That's one thing that we have pretty crystal clear. And rather than trying to tackle everything in the Hall van de Kassel system, I thought I should just try to take on one thing at a time. So I tried to create a system for representing the emotional content of dreams. I started by looking at other people's systems. Can you still see my screens? I want to just show, I should have put this in the images, but I didn't have time. This is something called Pulchuk's color wheel of emotions, or emotional color wheel. And this is the kind of thing that psychologists, like academic people get paid to produce this, in which, they've so cleanly classified all of our emotions into 8 categories, right? And they're all kind of opposed to one another. So this one is kind of opposed to these ones, and these ones are all opposed to this. And there's 3 of these. Oh, and lo and behold, there's 3 of these and 3 of these. And it's all just this perfect system of, and it's absolute garbage. It's just completely surprise. Surprise is apparently one of our key emotions, and it's the opposite of anticipation, so it would seem. Right? I mean, they're trying to put the wealth of human experience into a container so rigid is just nuts. So I had to abandon the psychological systems that I found. I'm not saying that they're all that bad, but the ones that I looked at, I thought it would be more fun to make up my own anyway. So I did, and these are the emotions that I came up with. Emotions / feelings. Or whatever there is, confusion. What is that? And ta-da! This is what it generates. This is a diagram of a lady's dream, and the time is moving from the center outwards. So each of these colored rings represents an emotional state that she's in, and obviously these circles around her are the people that she encounters in her dream. The connections between them are indications of the kind of relationships that they have. So Valerie is a friend. My guy is a kind of romantic relationship. These guys are strangers, these 2 tortured naked men, strangers. And the position on this sort of circle is also an indication of the kind of interaction that she has with these people. So my guy is a very positive interaction. These 2 tortured naked men is a neutral sort of, neither positive nor a negative, and so on. So yeah, this is a very, you can see there's a lot of emotional states going on, and they're all sort of maxed out. This is a very intense, long dream. This is from this woman who frequently dreams that she is a vampire or dreams about vampires. And has a very negative interaction with this group of vampires, but is doing pretty good with this animal named Shay. Yeah, so this is a dream of a Vietnam vet. There's a collection of those available in the dream database that I'm using. I'll go back. You can kind of maybe this is just too much information. I don't know how to do these things, but you'll see that the sort of so-called negative feelings are almost all kind of greens and blues and browns, kind of cooler colors, whereas the more positive feelings are purples and reds and yellows. So even if you don't get into the specifics of whether it's suspicion or anxiety or what, you can fairly, at a glance, get a pretty good indication that this is a stressful, not a very pleasant dream. And this guy is having nightmares about Vietnam into the 90s, which was sad. Not exclusively. He's not having exclusively nightmares, but Yeah, so this is a representation of his dream. And one of the things that I like about these is just how ambiguous the labeling is. You just end up with someone or man one that somehow morphed into a woman friend. And so there's this, again, it's this kind of nice way of like preserving the subjective privacy and intimacy of the dream experience, and yet also kind of presenting it in this kind of rigorous scientific way. And it's interesting that, in fact, there's a very patient fellow at the Dream and Nightmare laboratory in Montreal, who I've been pestering and saying, oh, can I come into a residency? Oh, I'm going to Struts. Can I drive out to Montreal and hang out with you and like look at your lab and stuff? Anyway, he seems to think that this actually has some potential for research in dreaming, because it does, at a glance, you can start to track such things as the kinds of people that you have relationships with, have dreams about, whether they're family members or friends or enemies, whether you tend to have positive or negative interactions with people in your dreams, what kinds of emotions are predominant. So if I was to make a sort of a wall full of these, you could see 100 of them or 30 of them over a month or something, then you'd get a bit of a sense as to what kind of a dreaming profile you have, perhaps. And that led me to, did I close this? No, it's in here somewhere. This is actually something that you're able to participate in yourself if you are of the inclination. This is the visualizing emotional content of dreams. You can read lots of blah, blah, blah in English and in French, by the way. Thanks very much, Audrey. And I got I programmed it. I figured out how to make the programming for it, but to turn it from processing into P5.js and to like get it web worthy and stuff, I kind of needed a little help. So, but you can go there and you can use it. Use this tool that's online to rate your own emotional states and put in the different people that you encounter and so on, and create your own these sort of weird looking. I don't know. They kind of look like alien. What are the crop circles? There's this kind of, again, kind of otherworldly kind of element to them. Okay, so I think that I've covered a large part of the work, maybe a little bit too quickly. So maybe I will just take advantage of being on a soapbox for a moment to just talk a little bit about why, sort of the why of the project. And again, I think that I'm deluded, right? I think that there's a kind of just, there's a sort of idiocy about it all that's probably kind of required. Or maybe not idiot, but certainly a kind of melodrama. I think I sort of see the phenomenon of dreaming in fairly romantic, even melodramatic kinds of terms. And it's strange because they're so forgettable. They're so easily ignored. As soon as I start telling somebody starts telling you, hey, I had a dream last night, immediately you just go blank. Who cares? Oh, really? You're not going to tell me your dream? It's like, hey, I've got a poem I've got to read you. It's like just, yeah, no offense to the poets out there, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. But they're important at a bunch of different levels. There's something that are universal. We all dream. Our enemies dream, our friends dream, the rich dream, the poor dream, Trump dreams. It's a universal phenomenon that's also extremely creative. It's something that it's not only in the domain of artists or designers or people that are sort of in some kind of creative world. It's just something that we all do automatically. So it's something that's like built into our biology, that we have this kind of expressive creative function. And this expressive creative function has extremely important health benefits. It's part of our regulative system to keep us healthy. And it's completely bizarre and mysterious. Again, like I have a PhD in philosophy. So I spent, it's from a philosophical point of view, the notion of experience itself, like when our kidneys do whatever kidneys do, they do so without our experiencing what kidneys do. I mean, if they break, then they hurt, then we feel our kidneys. But I could have gone my entire life without ever knowing I had a kidney. I mean, millions and millions of people have lived and died without even knowing that there were kidneys. But dreaming seemed like the function that dreaming fulfills for us is not something. It seems necessary that we experience it. Like, why don't we just go to sleep and have the brain chemically do whatever it needs to do in order to heal itself, in order to, right, whatever your understanding of the mind at night, like it just kind of can do its own thing. But that's not enough. We actually have to have some experience of this. We have to go through these emotionally, sometimes quite traumatic experiences that are, can be often quite powerful. I've had dreams in which I was madly in love. Oh my gosh, I still remember that dream. And it was just crippling to find out that when I woke up, that it was just a dream. Or rage, right? I mean, you wake up extremely angry or really upset, one thing or another. Lots of stuff. My dad passed away not that long ago, and I dream about him almost all the time. So I mean, there's a really important function of the actual experience of dreaming. We can't just be reduced to brain systems. We have to be understood phenomenologically as these experiencing systems, and this is one of the things that dreaming helps us to remember. So they have this great sort of thing, and I again, this is where it's maybe even weirder. I sort of see dreams as presenting a kind of a space of resistance, which is a word that's rightly, quite popular at the moment. And I can't fully articulate how I see dreams as a site of resistance. Or when I start to talk about this, I think people kind of get a little kind of glassy-eyed. But they're somehow in amongst the world that's trying to understand us exclusively in physical terms, as objects of empirical science, or in terms of biology, as pharmaceutical companies can regulate our chemical intake, to see us exclusively as biological entities, or in social media and the social world right now to try to understand us exclusively as statistics, visible through our cookies and so on. There is this kind of reductionist, quantifying tendency. And I think dreams really resist this because they're just so damn hard to study, and they're so damn hard to pin down and to quantize. So for me, they still kind of represent this like space of freedom, even freedom from ourselves, right? Like there's this very ambivalent question about the author of our dreams. Obviously, when I fall asleep and I have a dream, I'm the one that's inventing the dream. But at the same time, I'm experiencing the dream, right? I'm the one that is somehow, I dream that there's a box and I don't know what's inside the box, but I must know what's inside the box because I'm the one that made the box, right? So there's this kind of splitting of the self that seems to happen. How do I, and that to me is, I guess, this a space of like radical freedom that is free from political concern, it's free from social concern, it's free from physical concern, it's free from biological concern, and yet it sort of is created from all of those things. It's biological, it's social, it's psychological, it's physical. So maybe that's enough. That's enough to sort of express how interesting these things are philosophically to me. So yeah, partly my goal is not to sort of realize these dreams in a literal way, but rather to celebrate their refusal to be registered, refusal to be encompassed by this kind of juggernaut of empirical science. And I want to celebrate that resistance and that refusal. So there you are.
Excellent.
If I was on stage, this is now when you would applaud.
Yeah, this is.
I can't hear you. I can't hear anything. So
No, we're not.
Oh, can you hear us?
Oh, now I can hear you. Yes, yes, yes. I can hear you too. Thank you very much.
You were clapping quietly, but,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Thank you.
enthusiastically.
Yes, on behalf of everyone.
The world. Oh, it's so gratifying to hear. Thank you.
You can stop sharing your screen maybe at this point, and we can.
Okay, right. Yeah, I can do that.
And then we will
Right.
to see if there are questions.
No, I can't stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, so I encourage anybody who has any questions for Ben to type them into the Q&A section. Yeah, I wondered if you have ever analyzed your own dreams, or if you're strictly really want to keep it as a objective exercise.
Well, again, I don't know how interesting my dreams are in particular. Some of them sure are, and I've included them in different places kind of out of necessity. You know, it's easier to wire myself up to a BCI device than it is to you know, anyone else. Hey, hey, anybody, can I, you know, it's you get in trouble. So yeah, I think it would be even a little bit too sort of self-absorbed to just exclusively focus on my own dreams. But maybe there's something that's I'm also sort of hiding in that too. I don't know.
Well, it's just that idea that you said about the splitting the self when you're in, you know, the idea of making the box and also not knowing what's in it. It's almost like adding this third level of you like then trying to parse like, I mean, I also understand this sort of having this like sort of cool remove and like serving as sort of the data analyst and not having
right.
investment, but also wondered if there was value in that sort of other layer of like that.
Yeah, well, and I think that maybe other practice at the moment is making autobiographical projects a little bit more kind of hip right now. There's a lot of autobiography going on, I think, and so maybe this wouldn't be totally inappropriate. I guess I'm just sort of I find kind of more poignant in a way the idea of the 79-year-old woman who her dream from 1992 is she's probably long gone by now, and here's this artifact that's like left over, this bizarre kind of meaningless abstract object that yet was created from her brain, right? So there's the yeah.
Well, I agree, but I know what you mean. Like that would be my inclination as well, to sort of, then you can step back and look at something in a more abstract way and not try to like justify the phallus that emerges, you know, or like what it is. And
yeah.
And I think that the objective approach certainly, I was just sort of curious if you ever tried to map and if you had extrapolated anything in a different way from that. But.
Yeah, well, there is a certain amount of smoke and mirrors involved in some of this as well. Like, why did I choose to put sequins on one and moss on another or whatever? And some of those choices are kind of arbitrary. Like I decided that because I'm the artist and I get to do with that what I want. So there's always been this question about how much fidelity you have to the data. I mean, is this, am I making a scientific project in which we're now going to look at all these objects and somehow read into them? I mean, that's curious to in and of itself, is just the fact that we can see, you know, some kind of thing like and think, okay, there's got to be some meaning in there. This is a dream. This is important stuff. And how can we decipher? And look, mine's green and his is, all the women's ones are all purple and all the guys ones are all, you know, there's some, we want to try to read into this in some kind of way. So I'm playing with our expectations a little bit as well.
We have a question from Jeff Woods. He asks, is your understanding of dreaming that they are happening as they are experienced versus the notion that they are your brain processing in retrospect as it tries to make a timeline of disconnected brain static?
Phenomenologically, we experience them as we're experiencing them. I don't think I'm even familiar with the idea of there being this kind of lag. From everything I've read, they're you know, it's a real-time experience. The question is just what's causing the visual cortex to sort of fire like that. And again, Hobson's early response is that it's just extra information from the brainstem. But now we've got fMRI scan stuff, which can show us a lot more than because we can see different centers of activation at a much deeper level. And we see frontal cortex, we see stuff going on in the forebrain, which is where we're making it up. We're actively creating the story as well. So it's not just memory. Maybe I didn't fully understand the question, but or maybe Jeff has a better understanding of or more complicated understanding of dreaming than I do. My reading, I've read a fair bit, but I'm also reading a lot of the psychological literature rather than just the neuroscience of it.
We have an anonymous question. There is a rhythmic audio-like quality to these dream diagrams. Do those represent the programmatic nature of the collection or reflective of a cadence within dreams?
They are, I would say that's definitely not necessarily a property of the dreams itself. This is all from the programming, from the manipulation of data. I mean, and again, like what we're looking for in these diagrams, I was very lucky to go into Geneva a couple of days ago, where I met some, real sleep scientists, and strangely enough, they were more phenomenological than I was, at least in the way that I was expressing myself at the time. And they emphasized how important it would, like, this EEG data is not a dream. This is just registering, electrical activity on your scalp, which is kind of referencing what's going on in your brain. But when we think of brain waves, well, EEG is a fairly, it's not a very robust way of examining what's happening in the brain. So the stuff that you're looking at in my diagrams are sort of, they're trying to access this subjective world, but they're failing. And yet there are these patterns that emerge, and there are these kinds of moments of compositional unity. There's some nice things that happen aesthetically. But that's not, I don't think, a feature of dreaming itself, or what's happening in the brain during dreaming. Certainly not represented by what I'm doing.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Emma Anderson asks, have you noticed that you've dreamed more since you started doing this research?
That's a good question. But I think no. I don't think I've, because we all basically dream the same amount. If you're a healthy adult, then you have these periods, the sleep cycle goes through periods of deep sleep and periods of REM sleep. Deep sleep happens earlier on in the night. REM sleep happens later on in the morning period. The difference between people that sort of say that they dream a lot and people that say that they never dream is just memory. So your brain, so think about what a memory is from a biological point of view. It's a neuronal event, right? And that relies on neurotransmitters of a certain kind, and those are simply not present when you're asleep. So that's why you can't remember your dreams. Most of us find it very difficult to remember our dreams, and others, maybe that the mechanism that's regulating the amount of acetylcholine or norepinephrine or whatever the neurotransmitters are, for some it's just a little bit stronger, and for others it's a little bit weaker. So some people are more able to remember their dreams. So short answer, I don't, I think that I'm dreaming the same amount. I'm waking up a lot more. So I'm noticing I've had chronic insomnia for a year and a half, rather ironically. And so I wake up a lot more, and so I'm much more aware of my dreams than I was.
Emma's follow-up question you may have just answered, but she says, but do you remember your dreams more then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have that because I'm waking up more. So I'm having more opportunities to sort of be awake at that moment where you can still sort of remember them. But I don't know that I'm necessarily paying more attention to them. As I say, there are some that strike me and I wake up and I want to forget. And I kind of, run out of the room or whatever. And others that I like to hang on to. And so I kind of, keep them. I've take notes and stuff on them sometimes, but I'm not, I've encountered, there's all these other people. I showed you Bernard, but there's all these people on various Facebook communities and people in the world that are obsessed with logging their dreams. And understanding their dreams and trying to use them as tools to unlock themselves and so on and so forth. And I think that that's that can be really rewarding sort of activity, but it's not something that I'm doing a lot of myself. Yeah.
Very cool. I'd like to wrap up then. I think it's just coming up to 4 o'clock. Thank you very, very much for this. This was really great.
And also, I wanted to confirm that we will send you a box of Canadian sprinkles.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
Being able to host you here.
Right. Yeah, that's the one thing that I've been missing. That I think pretty much we've got everything else that France is, we've got it pretty good, but the sprinkles, man.
Set you up.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank everybody also for joining us, and to remind you that next week, Friday, June 11th, we will be hosting a virtual talk and a screening by Saskatoon-based artist Lisa Burke, who is serving as the mentor for our upcoming timeshare mentorship program. So please join us for that as well. And I also wanted to mention that earlier during the talk, we posted a link to Ben's personal website, the dreamrealizationlab.com. So you can check out that link. And also Lucas has just posted your page on our own website as well. Yeah, so
right. Which is kind of a summary of this.
Right. So you can kind of refer back to that and check it out. And we have lots of thanks from the guests, which you should read. But anyways, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to kind of teleport you here to Sackville and other places today. So,
great. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for having me. It's very, very good of you to have me and to sort of make something out of nothing. It's very good of you. So thank you very much. I'll arete. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.